scenario you've got, though, constitutionally, because, for example, if Stephen Fielding were to lose his Senate seat tonight, he'll still be there for another 11 months. So the Greens' hopes of holding the balance of power rest in the ACT, oddly enough. Can you explain to us why that is?
Well, as you've alluded to, in the territories, the senators take office immediately, and obviously the Greens are targeting Senator Gary Humphries' seat in the ACT, and if they gain that, that obviously has an impact on the Senate numbers. And I don't know whether George's view, what he thinks about where Gary is on that, but certainly the Greens have run a very strong campaign.
I do have a view. I think that although the Greens will undoubtedly poll quite strongly in the ACT, in order to displace Gary Humphries, they'd really have to get effectively a third of the vote, and I don't see that happening. I'd be very confident that this constitutional conundrum that fascinates you, Tony, will be a hypothetical.
Probably fascinates the whole of Australia by the time it actually happens. Thanks very much to both of you. We'll be back with you shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we're going to continue looking at interesting seats, but Stephen Smith has got some interesting information on a few of them himself right now. Stephen?
Well, reinforce Anthony's point. They're very small and very early, but Bennelong on about 1.5% counted. There's a 7% swing against us there. We always knew Bennelong would be tough. It's very early days. McEwen on 1% counted, there's a 7% swing towards us. And a good point to make here is Fran Bailey, of course, is retiring, so you take away that local member incumbency.
That was a very tight margin.
This is the prospect for us. Also in Leichhardt on about 2% counted, on about 3.5% counted, 10% swing against us, against Jim Turnow. He, of course, is up against Warren Entsch, who's trying to make a comeback, and he's well regarded. Again, it's very early, but Leichhardt and McEwen do show you the importance of the standing of the candidate, and I think we'll see a bit of that before the night's out.
Yeah, well, we'll take a look at those seats now, starting with Bennelong. This, as we've said, is northwest of Sydney Harbour. It's been a traditional Liberal seat until Maxine McHugh took it from John Howard at the last election. 1.4% margin, and our figure's only 0.4% counted.
We've got one booth. This is one of the Gladesville booths, and at this stage, John Alexander is ahead. These are only a small number, 46.3 to 38.1. But in that single booth, what we see on the next graphic is we see a swing of 7.2%. That's listed as a Lib gain. It is only one booth. Formula works out that way. I'd wait for 2 or 3 more booths before definitely giving it away to John Alexander. But for the Liberal Party, that is a very encouraging first booth in Bennelong.
OK, now we're going to look at the seat of Gilmore on the New South Wales South Coast. Joanna Gash has held this for the Liberals since '96, but the redistribution has made this, on paper, a Labor seat on a margin of 0.4%. So with 4.2% of the vote counted, Anthony?
Well, Joanna Gash will win this seat easily. It's been expected she would win this easily. She's well ahead on these votes. 50.8% of the first preference votes. Again, we factor in which booth the information is from to make our prediction, and we're predicting a 7.9% swing to Liberal Party. So Joanna Gash is re-elected. It's notionally a Liberal gain. It's one of the seats the Liberals need to win, but Joanna Gash easily returned in Gilmore. OK, Eden Monaro, one of the very interesting seats in New South Wales, as we've said, takes from Queanbeyan, just outside Canberra, and sprawls across to the southern coast and up into the mountains. Mike Kelly holds this for Labor on a margin of 2.3%. There's 2% of the vote counted. We'll use the numbers which are in the graphic. I'm just trying to see if I've got later figures, so I'll continue on here. Mike Kelly's ahead on those numbers. I've got slightly newer figures which are similar on the first preferences. When we factor in where that information is from, we're seeing a swing of 2.2 to Labor. I've got the swing as only 0.1 to the Liberal Party, and I've got a preference counting 10 of the 79 booths. The computer's given that away to Mike Kelly on those numbers. The slightly later figures I've got have him probably still ahead, but not definitely ahead, but certainly no sign of a big swing in Eden Monaro. OK, the seat of Macquarie, this is a very marginal seat for Labor, was held by Bob Davis. He's retired, and Louise Marcus, as we said, was the Liberal member of Greenway. She's moved across. 3% of the vote counted, Anthony. And at this stage, I can't see, our graphics are slightly behind, unfortunately, at the moment. The figures I've got, Louise Marcus is on 56.9, Susan Templeman on 25.6. Now, these are some small booths from the Mount Wilson, Mount Victoria, at the Mountains end of the election. I've got a swing at 2.7, the same as the one there, and that's indicating that it's in doubt and the Liberals are ahead in that seat. It's not given away, but that's a good first figure for the Liberal Party, and at this stage we're not giving it away.
Okay, now the seat of Cowper on the New South Wales North Coast. This is a marginal coalition seat, National Party seat with 1.2%. This takes in Coffs Harbour, Kempsey, so on. Held by Luke Hartsucker, 4.3% of the vote counted.
And at this stage, the graphics we've got it for slightly behind it. The figures are roughly the same. Luke Hartsucker on 1,443, 57% of the vote. Paul Sekfi on 26.4. When we factor in the booth that information is from, we're seeing a 6.7% swing to the National Party, and Luke Hartsucker will retain that easily for the National Party. So the National Party have retained their hold on that North Coast seat.
Okay, now the seat of McEwen that Stephen Smith was talking about a moment ago, this was Fran Bailey's seat. She was very important as the sitting member for the Liberals, Central Victoria and the Yarra Valley. She held that since '96. She's retired, and with 2.9% of the vote counted.
Again, I've got later figures than the computer shows. If one of my technicians is listening to this thing, if they can find out why the graphics are behind the numbers at the moment. But at the moment, the Liberal Party's well ahead on those first preference votes. I have a slight 3% counted and have preference counts in 4 booths. The swing there's 4.8 to Labor. I've got an even bigger swing now, 5.7 swing to Labor. And on those numbers, Rob Mitchell, who used to be in the state upper house in Victoria, he will go on to win the seat, and certainly on the later figures I've got, that's what he'll occur.
Okay, Nick Minchin, I know the early figures.
Had Brisbane looked at, might be worth looking at, because that's an inner city seat where there's been 6.1% counted and showing a 5% swing to the Liberal candidate, Teresa Gambaro, which would of course give us the seat. I mean, I generally think any numbers less than about 10% are a bit dodgy, but we're getting into the 6% country, and if we can pick up a seat like Brisbane, an inner city seat, and you're getting swings at 5 to 6%, then we could be seeing the sort of flow through in Queensland that many have anticipated. Because you've got to remember there was a huge swing to the Labor Party in 2007 on the back of Kevin Rudd and Wayne Swan, and that's the worry for Labor, that the tide then goes back out again.
I think it's a very good point that Nick has made. I mean, a number of these seats we've won on swings as high as 10 to 14%. So you expect them to move back, and that's one of the dangers.
Yeah.
And for example, I've just got here in Longman, for example, it's only 1.5% counted, but Longman swing against us is 10%. Now that'd be an outlying booth, and it's too small, but it's an additional factor. You've got, and for example, the Liberal Party bunting today in Queensland was all Anna Bligh. So you've got the state factors as well, and then you've got a big swing to get over the line in 07. You've got to expect that some of that's going to come back.
But Anna Bligh says it's all Kevin Rudd's fault, I saw.
Well, it's just we're in the hot seat today.
But it's obviously very volatile. And I mean, part of the feedback I heard today from Queensland was that from Labor's perspective, in regional Queensland, it was a somewhat happier situation than in the city of Brisbane, where it was described to me as gloomy.
Well, I'd be surprised. I mean, because this mining tax is really resonating in regional Queensland, and the feeling I got on the ground in regional Queensland was, as Stephen mentioned, Herbert and Leichhardt, I think we will pick up from Labor tonight.
Okay.
I think Herbert...
Just very quickly.
Herbert is a show for us, I think, because you've got Peter Lindsay retiring. That makes it, a bit more of a go for us, but time will tell. Okay,
now we're going to break away for a mere minute and a half. We're just going to catch some news headlines, and then we're going to come straight back to where the action is starting to hot up now. We're going to plunge straight into some more seat counts. We're going to focus on Queensland for a few minutes, where there is clearly a swing on. The size of the swing we're going to try and work out. We'll start with the seat of Bowman, which takes in around the Brisbane Bayside area, and Bowman is held on a very slender margin by the Liberals, Andrew Laming. He's held it since 2004. We've got 1.6% of the vote counted. Anthony?
Yeah, the Election Commission had this one so close it gave both parties the same number of votes. These are a small entry of votes, 1.5% counted, 45.7% for Andrew Laming, Jenny Peters 38. We've got 4 first preference booths in that lot, and we've got 1 preference count for that booth. for that electorate. When we factor in that preference count, it shows the 15%. I will point out that is the Dunwich booth, which I think is on North Stradbroke or Dunwich. It's on North Stradbroke Island, or one of the islands.
Yep.
It's not a representative booth, so you can't take 15%. I think everyone's accepted the Labor Party will not win Bowman. I think there's a general perception that the swing will be well against Labor there.
Okay, now we'll look at the seat of Blair, which is around Ipswich and in the Brisbane Valley. We've got a lot of votes counted here. Now, this is held by Shane Newman for Labor since 2007. With a margin of 7%, we got nearly 18% of the vote counted, and there is a swing against him.
And this was we've got preference counts in 12 of the 53 booths. Shane Newman is ahead. Niels Abel, this is based on Ipswich and the Esk Valley to the north. Shane Newman's ahead on those first preferences. 11 votes there with Patricia Peterson, who's not directed preferences to Labor from memory. From my memory, 5.4% swing. The seat is in doubt, and Labor is ahead at this stage of the night. This stage, we're not giving Blair away. The margin was increased in that seat by the redistribution. Okay,
the seat of Bonner, which is in Brisbane's inner eastern suburbs. Kerry Ray picked this up in 2007 for Labor with a margin of 4.5% and nearly 7% of the vote counted.
And Ross Faster is the former member. He held the seat from its creation in 2004 to 2007. It's named after Neville Bonner, the Indigenous senator from Queensland. Ross Faster's ahead on those first preference votes. We've got a preference count from Tangalooma. Again, it's one of the booths it's not off the coast, can't remember where it is, I've forgotten now. Anyway, the Bonner, there's a 1.9% swing to the Liberals, not enough to change, but certainly that seat's too much in doubt. We haven't got enough of the vote counted there.
Okay, now we come to Kevin Rudd's seat of Griffith in Brisbane's inner southern suburbs. We're about to come to it, there it is. Held by Kevin Rudd since 1998, did have a margin of 12.3%. Bit of a move on here with 4.4% of the vote counted.
And Kevin Rudd is the sitting member. He's held it since 98. Kevin Rudd 1782 to Rebecca Doherty 1405, 46 to 36, 13% there with the Greens. Some small numbers with the other minor parties. And at this stage, that's translating into a swing of 4.5%, which means that the Labor Party would retain that. It is currently the safest Labor seat in Queensland.
All right, now we're going to come to the panel and get some more figures again, but just quickly we'll take a look at the state swing in Queensland again. Anthony?
We're doing a comparison of the states here. What we're seeing in Queensland, overall we're seeing a swing of 5.8% to the LNP in Queensland. So that's a significant swing to them. The question is, that could deliver them 10 seats. The question is, how uniform will that swing be? Will it deliver the 10 seats?
Okay, we'll have a look at the New South Wales swing.
In New South Wales, the swing is 6.1% to the coalition. Again, the question is, will this be uniform in every seat?
But how much counted?
6%. At this stage, that's sort of settling into a swing. The question is whether every seat has reported some figures at this stage. There'll still be a tendency to sort of outer metropolitan and non-metropolitan booths in those figures. But we see a very different picture when we go south of the Murray. In Victoria, what we're seeing is a 0.1% swing to the Liberal Party. So basically no shift at all at this stage in Victoria, though again, most of those figures are heavily dominated by votes from outside of Melbourne. And then when we cross Bass Strait to Tasmania, there are no seats changing hands in Tasmania at this election. We've got a significant count there, and there's a 4.3% swing to the Labor Party, boosting Labor's hold on the state even further than it is now.
Okay, now one of the most high-profile participants in this campaign, front and centre for the coalition, has been Joe Hockey, the Shadow Treasurer, and he's standing by in his Sydney seat of North Sydney. Joe Hockey, we're not going to worry too much about your numbers at this stage because everyone's going to assume you're back. But what is your feeling of what's going on right now?
Well, Kerry, I think quite obviously there's a swing in Queensland and New South Wales. I think our members have done a great job in Victoria and South Australia in sandbagging their seats, so our losses should be minimal there. Much will come down to Western Australia, I feel, and who knows how Solomon's going to go in the Northern Territory, but it's going to be a very long night, I think.
But it's interesting, you're obviously counting on and hoping for a swag of seats in Queensland and New South Wales, but I suppose it shows just how tough a task you've got, that you're counting it right down to individual seats like Solomon in the Territory and possibly one, maybe two, in Western Australia.
Well, that's right, Kerry. It was always going to be